Look at your program, you'll see the next speaker is Robert Rausch, formerly head of the Dell Healthcare PMO. Robert, you got him.
Thanks, Jim. Let me start out as I do with all of my presentations by turning on the microphone. Let me begin by asking, how many of you are project managers? That's a pretty fair sized group you've got. How many of you are PMO leaders or involved with PMOs? There we go. Now we're talking to the A group. Just kidding, guys. Did everyone enjoy Dr. Daniel's presentation? Very nice. So I'm standing over on the side and I'm listening to him talk about deep water drilling, and he's talking about pressure testing and loud hissing sounds. And that's something that I can personally relate to as the parent of 2 teenage girls. And this is a really busy time in my life. Starting a new job. Mr. Joyner referred to me as the leader of the Dell Healthcare Services PMO, and as of last Friday, that was a fair statement. As of next week, I'll be taking on a new role, so it's very exciting and a very stressful time for those of you that have changed jobs in the recent past. We're also selling our house. We're also moving into a new house. I've got 2 daughters. Both of them are going to college at the University of Oklahoma and the University of Missouri. So I'm not sure who you are clapping for, but there's a lot of consternation in our house over that. But by the way, all that, folks, is happening this week. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my version of pressure testing. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Robert Rausch. I'm a 25-year project manager. All of my friends are PMs. We've got a happy hour every Friday night with PMs. I'm married to a project manager who typically attends these kinds of events with me. And she can't be here today because the second daughter is heading to Oklahoma. And we weren't initially going to travel with her out there. It's only 2.5 hours, 3 hours, depending on who's driving. And it's a good opportunity for her to get settled and really get off on her own. But something really traumatic happened to us last Saturday. And as I noted, there are a lot of changes in my life, and I'll talk about what we call princess trauma in our house. And our daughters are lovingly referred to as the princesses. So again, new job, new house, selling the house, kids off to college. But hey, Wynn and I are project managers. And what do project managers do when you have a whole bunch of stuff going on? You make lists. Make lots of lists. You got a list for the 4 contractors that are working on the new house. You got a list for the 3 contractors that are working on the old house. The girls have lists for each of them going off to college. I've got lists because I'm supposed to be managing the movers. We've got all of this ton of stuff going on in the last 3 days. On Friday, I resigned from my job at Dell Services. On Friday afternoon, I closed on a house, and Saturday morning, the movers showed up. And all of this really busy stuff, Wendy's on the phone with the 4 contractors at the other house and the 3 contractors working on this house, and they're replacing mirrors and painting stuff and patching holes and putting down hardwoods in the new place. Everything's moving at this just phenomenal pace. And the movers are there, and they're packing stuff up, and they're loading stuff, and all of a sudden, my daughter Kirsten walks up and says, "Dad, it's time to go." And it's like a scene from The Matrix. You've got all of this action going on, all of this movement. All of a sudden, it stops. And the camera turns. And it all focuses on my daughter going off and starting the next phase of her life and becoming really an adult right before my eyes. Anybody going through that stuff before with kids? It is horrible. I had no idea. I can see the tears welling up now. It's horrible. So the whole fam and I are out in the front yard, and we've got this big group hug going. Movers are looking at us, and contractors are kind of confused and wondering what's going on. And it really sad. It took me, frankly, 3 days to recover it, and recover from it. And I'm not typically an emotional person, but it was it totally derailed us. From a project perspective, we totally lost our keel. Nobody really cared about the packers and the movers and the folks shifting stuff around, and everything was focused on that one event, that one simple event that we knew was going to happen. So my reason for bringing this up and sharing with you, sharing this story with you, is that if two 25-year project managers can get derailed by a known event, it can happen to any of you. And my guess is, by the roiling laughter in the audience, it's happened to all of you. My point, my issue, and my career have all been about taking the emotion out of managing a project. You've all managed projects before that become shouting matches. You can't conduct the lessons learned because, well, everybody's just complaining about the job that everyone else did. And, you know, that's a wonderful thing, but unfortunately, you're not going to be too successful running a project that way. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about what I've done personally and professionally. Well, professionally anyway. You just heard what I did personally. I cried. What I've done professionally to help take some of the emotion out of project management. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are certification program for PMs, development of capacity metrics, and implementing something called a leverage PM pool. And many of you are going to take away bits and pieces of this as things that you can apply immediately in your business and your organization. If you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to give you guys my email address and phone number at the end of the presentation. Always looking for different perspectives on project management, and especially project manager optimization. Look forward to the presentation with you guys, and let's get started. So, how did I get invited to this? I'm a humble project manager working for a humble PMO leader, I should say, working for a mid-sized to large company. And one day, the big boss walks in, says, hey, Bert, how many project managers do we have in healthcare? I don't know, Bert, 200, give or take? How many do we need? Well, that's a good question. I mean, they're all dispersed throughout the United States, working on different projects for different accounts. They report to account PMO leaders who report up to me. And the account PMO leaders are responsible for hiring PMs and servicing their projects and all that stuff. And so, you know, they tell me they need somebody, I get them, or they hire someone. That's pretty easy. That's a great system. How many do we need? What kind of question is that? We need enough to get the projects delivered. I don't know, 250. Come on, give me a good answer. Well, it took me 6 months to come up with a good answer. And he probably didn't expect the answer that I came up with. But at the end of the presentation, I'm going to tell you what our answer was. And it was compelling enough to convince our friends at PMO Solutions and PMI to make us their 2011 PMO of the Year. So before we get into any of that, let's talk about what project management and project management organizations mean to the business. The great thing about being PMO of the Year is you get to travel to places like Rio de Janeiro and Berlin and do all these really great presentations. Of course, if your wife's a project manager, you both go to Rio de Janeiro and Berlin. But yes, you don't get to travel, guys. You don't get to travel to Rio alone. I'm sorry. No matter what award you win. But when we're doing these presentations, it's universal. PMO leaders are coming up to me at the end of each one of these things saying, my company just doesn't buy into project management. They don't see the value. They see it as overhead. It's administrative. We just generate reports. We do all that stuff. And what would you do about it? And my answer is, what you do about it is integrate with the business. Our project management office at Dell Services wasn't a support organization. We integrated ourselves into the business to the point where we were part of the business. When our consultants go out to sell Dell products and services to hospitals, one of the services that they offer is PMO support for their existing projects. That's how you bring value. That's how the organization knows that understands the value that you bring, because you got dollars associated with it. If you're not in a company or a business in which they can sell your services, at least ensure that they understand the dollar value of the services that you provide, and we'll talk about that. A lot of PMO leaders ask me about maturity levels, and everybody wants to talk about portfolio management. No one knows what it means, but everybody wants to talk about it. So don't worry about it. Ensure that you're integrated with the business and you're providing value, and really, as you grow into a larger organization, all of that stuff will become more apparent to you in terms of portfolio management, resource management, and all that stuff. But up front, just make sure that the services that your organization provides brings value. Focus on delivering real rather than perceived value. Everybody knows that training makes project managers better. Everybody thinks that training makes project managers better at what they do. And that's probably fair in most cases, but how do you quantify it? And I'll show you some of that. One of the things, Josh, that'll really get my attention as a PMO leader is a PM coming in and telling a customer that we do it this way because that's the process. Guys, if you're telling the customer we do it because that's the process, you get strangled. Our guideline is that you take your shoes off when you walk onto that nice hardwood floor in our new house. But you know what? If the house is on fire, I don't want the fireman wasting his time taking his rubber boots off. I want him to go in there and put the damn fire out. So don't worry about process. Ensure that your guys or you as a project manager understand the process is designed to reduce risk and improve cost. So how do we calculate the number of project managers we need in an organization? That was my first problem. How many PMs do we need? That's a good question. Depends on the number of active projects, staffing criteria, incoming pipeline of work. That is, we have 10 we only need 3 PMs today, but we may need 10 6 weeks from now. Depends on contractual requirements. Do we have to have a project manager dedicated to this effort? Depends on the skill levels of the PMs and geographic constraints. So, you know, he wasn't doing me any favors when he asked that question. So, in order to answer his question, here are the steps that we took. We created an inventory of current and pipeline projects. Ensured that standard project management methodology is being used. How many of you use a standard project management methodology? Whew. Boy, I did this in Latin America and no one raised their hand. I hope that it was just a translation issue. At some point, Josh, I'm going to rate the project managers in our new organization. And some of the PMs are going to be beginner level, and some are going to be master level, and there'll be a whole bunch in between. I think that's an important step to determining how many PMs you need. We developed management standard utilization metrics for each PM. How many projects can a PM manage? Think about that question for a few moments. Enforce your project management standards through project assignments, that is the leverage PM pool. If you have one central organization that's making project manager, assigning PMs to projects, we get the right PM on the right project, and we assure that that PM is being fully utilized. And finally, we're going to use management standards for analysis and financial justification. So I'm going to tell you what the value of training is. The first thing we're going to talk about is project inventory. As a consultant walking into your company, the first thing I'm going to want to know is, what are all the active projects? I want to understand what's currently in the pipeline today and what's coming in. I want to create a central repository with common parameters. In other words, how am I measuring the status of our project? It started on this day, it's due on this day, and I probably have a half dozen things in between. Remember that project volume isn't the only piece of analyzing and optimizing project management capacity. I might have 50 projects and they're all involving moving printers from one floor to the next. Or I might have 2 projects that involve data center migrations from Europe to the United States. So it's not just the volume of projects, it's how big those projects are. So the first step in optimizing PM capacity is understanding project volume. So moving on to a brief discussion of methodology. Define the roles and responsibilities of a PM within your organization. Pretty much every one of you said you had a methodology. Does everyone have a job description for a project manager in their company? That's a tougher question. So I called the service desk and asked the guy to help me out getting MS Project installed on my new computer. The guy's an MS Project genius. 15 seconds later, I'm installed. So I've got a meeting later that afternoon with a customer, and the customer is going to want to talk about MS Project. So I'm talking to the service desk guy, hey, you got a half an hour this afternoon to sit in on this meeting for me? Well, service desk guy wants to be helpful. I said, yeah, sure, I'll be glad to sit in on that meeting because I'm a genius when it comes to MS Project, because everybody wants to be helpful. Well, if I'm the service desk manager, the last thing I want that guy doing is sitting in on a meeting. I want that guy answering service desk calls. That's what we're paying him for, and that's how we keep the train moving down the track. And the same thing's true with project managers. You find that if a customer is calling, internal or external customer is calling a PM and asking him or her to work on this, or that, you probably don't have a very efficient project management organization. So make sure you define the roles and responsibilities clearly. You develop a standard methodology. The methodology should reflect best practices and be flexible. Oh my gosh, you know how many companies that I've talked to in the last year that have a battleship for a project management methodology? You want to get that printer downstairs, 80-something pieces of paper. Isn't that great? I just love that. Oh my God, come on guys. I mean, pick it up and you take it down there. The teenagers could answer that. Well, maybe. Make sure that you have consistent application of your project management methodology. My wife is a project manager for a large defense contractor, and they have a methodology. This one, and that one, and that one, and that one. There's so many methodologies. You don't know which methodology to choose when you got a cross-functional project. So whatever you do, just make sure you're applying it consistently. So the first thing that we're going to do, if we're in order to answer Burke's question, how many project managers we need, we're going to inventory projects in the pipeline. We're going to ensure that everybody's following the methodology. And then we're going to do something really cool. We're going to rate the project managers. And every symposium, every discussion I have involves, how do you guys do that? That's genius. Well, let's talk about what it is. It's called a certification program, and it assesses a rating to a project manager. And the process can be as simple as you're a beginner, you're mid-range, you're a master. There you go. I've rated them all. It can be as complex as analyzing artifacts, conducting interviews, all of that stuff. It's important because what I'm going to show you in a moment is that I'm going to ask our senior guys to do more work than our beginner PMs. I recommend 3 to 5 certification levels. Keep it as low as possible depending on your organization. If you're a large defense contractor, you've got 9 certification levels, and that's ridiculous because you just can't keep track of all of that. If you're a small to mid-size organization, maybe it's just 1 or 2. Generally speaking, 3 works pretty good. You want your top-level PMs to be about the top 20% of PMs in the organization. Identify objective criteria, because when you establish a certification program, folks, and a PM is rated lower than he or she thinks they are, you're going to be called upon to identify the objective criteria that led you to that conclusion. I would recommend, if possible, to implement financial incentives for achieving higher levels of certification, because higher level certifications mean I'm going to make you work harder, and if you work harder, I need fewer project managers. So there's a financial benefit to doing this. The levels of certification that I recommend: beginner, mid-level, and master. I won't read through each level, other than to say it continually builds on itself. In my prior organization, achieving the designation of a master PM was drinking from the Grail. It identified you as being one of the best PMs in our company. We're routinely managing projects between $5 and $20 million. And the only guys that get to, the only men or women that get to manage a project that large are master project managers, period. You're not trusting that to anybody else. So in order to be a master PM, we actually grab some of your project artifacts from your prior work and we dissected them, and we determined whether or not the work that you were performing was appropriate for a master level. Then we conducted a committee interview. 3 master PMs interviewed you and asked questions to determine whether or not you really were operating at a master level. And then we talked to your sponsors. You know, Josh's a pretty good project manager, but what do you think? Does he have the leadership skills that one would expect of a master PM, or is he pretty much just an administrator? And both of those roles are important, don't get me wrong, but we want our master PMs to be the guys lashed on the deck of the ship with waves crashing over the bow and barking orders at the crew. We don't want them below deck on the radio asking if everybody's getting their stuff done. So we want somebody that we can put in a customer, put in front of a customer that has that aura about them of somebody that's in charge and somebody that demonstrates leadership. So let's talk about some of the benefits of certification. As a PM, as noted, man, you get a master PM designation in our company, you feel like you're really somebody. And you are really somebody, because it's in a 200-person project management organization. I think we had 30 master PMs, so it was a big deal. It leads to more challenging assignments, professional development, and in our organization, financial incentives. From a customer perspective, it's a sales differentiator. When I'm standing in front of one of our customers and explaining what master PM certification entails, their mouths drop open, because most companies don't do that. And yeah, we want you guys, and we want you to assign one of those 30 master PMs to our account. The problem is we didn't have enough master PMs, so that started to get to be a problem too. It demonstrates commitment to quality. It instills confidence in the PM as well as the organization. From our company perspective, guys that are rated as a master PM are going to apply your best practices. It supports alignment of projects to PMs, reduces the risk of misses, and as I'll show you in a few moments, it also reduces cost. So, took the long way around getting to capacity metrics overview, getting to PM capacity metrics. So again, what we've done is, in our organization, we've inventoried pipeline and outstanding projects. We've ensured that we have a methodology and that it's consistently applied. And we've rated our project managers. Wow, those are great things. All of our projects are going to be successful, right? Yeah, maybe not. They may be successful, but are they cost effective? If my organization budgets $5 million for project management, it costs me $8 million, that's not really successful, even though all the projects came in on time. Whew. Well, that's tough. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to tell Burke when I walk into his office, other than it's been a pleasure working with you. What we did with all of that information is attempt to maximize the amount of work that PMs perform based on the rating level and the projects that we needed to have managed. So PM capacity metrics refer to the number of projects PM can successfully manage. Again, all projects aren't created equal. Capacity is muddy because of projects vary in terms of complexity, in terms of work hours and budget dollars. we recommend using baseline effort as a metric as the best metric for project management capacity. You can say, I want all master PMs to manage 3 projects. Now that's okay, but if there are 3 printer moves, I'm not sure you're really doing anything. If you say, I don't know, I want a master PM, Jim, to manage 1,000 project hours a month. Ooh, that's kind of provocative. Project cycle in terms of number of hours per month. So, that stuff's kind of cool. But as an organization, come up with your own metrics. If you choose not to use the ones I'm going to demonstrate here in a moment, identify your own. Establish expectations that PMs will manage a minimum number of baseline hours each month. The best way to guarantee that your process works is to sell management on the idea that a PM can manage X number of project hours per month. So let's talk about it. Here is the holy grail of project management metrics. If you guys take nothing away from our discussion today, take away those top three bullet points, because it took me 6 months to generate those numbers. Call Gartner and ask them how many effort hours project managers should manage on the average on a monthly basis. Well, that's a good question, because projects are complex, and you got geographic issues and contractual issues and blah, 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 and all that stuff. They can't answer it. Call Forrester. And by the way, if you ever use Gartner in a presentation, there's a law that you have to say Forrester as well. So it's true, you can look it up. So the numbers that we came up with, and this may or may not be applicable to your organization, a master PM, your senior level guys on the average, should manage about 10 people a month. When I first ran these numbers, there were PMs that are managing 20 people a month. Think about that. You're managing, I'm thinking about Wendy and the 4 contractors at the new house, 3 contractors at the old house, and man, she's flying, but she's got it covered till Kirsten derailed us. But she's got it. A senior PM should be able to manage 10 people. When I ran these numbers initially, there were a large number of our senior PMs managing 2 FTEs, 2 people per month. Man, I can do that, but is that really cost effective? Do you really want a senior level person making a solid 6-figure salary managing 2 people? It just doesn't seem like a good use of resources to me. So whatever these numbers are, and I'll tell you a little bit about them, tell you a little bit more detail about them, but we started out at 10 FTEs for a senior PM, somewhere around 6 to 8 for mid-levels. We actually let the accounts establish mid-level PM targets, and beginners should manage 2 to 3 people a month. And these hours include client hours and vendor hours. Everything that the PM has to manage needs to show up in their project schedule, so that you know how many people they're managing. And one of the great corollary benefits was all of our PMs are pretty good at building. Most of our PMs are pretty good at building project schedules, but sometimes they get a little lazy. They don't like including client hours, vendor hours, all that stuff, 'cause that's a lot of work. But I'm going to include all of our people. Well, when you start telling them they're being rated and evaluated on the number of people per month that they manage, man, they get a lot more accurate really, really fast. It's amazing. So it was a great, we actually targeted vendor activities as a critical miss point on our projects. If our project had a large vendor presence with the vendor developing this or this or this component, there was a high probability of failure, because we frankly weren't overseeing the activities. We'd wait until the end, and if it worked, great, we made it. If it didn't work, man, it's too bad. So by including more vendor activities in the project schedule, we were able to keep a better handle on that. Project resources, based on our experience, could be either remote or on-site. We didn't note any significant differences between network SMEs in India or network SMEs in the United States or Guadalajara. So just, Mike, am I okay on time so far?
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay. Just slap me if I start doing what Dr. Daniel did. In terms of optimizing capacity, once I have those three numbers, those three simple numbers that no one could give me, I could do a lot of magic with it. And the consultants in our company, they just loved me. Walked in there and said, you know what, guys? Here's a great sales opportunity. Walk into an organization that says they have 4,800, a portfolio of 4,800, about 5,000 project hours per month. They've got 15 projects with 5,000 project hours. And ask how many PMs they have. Well, they got 15 projects. They got 15 project managers, right? I mean, that's the way it's common. Don't laugh. It is common. Actually, it's sadly common. Our guys walk in and say, wow, we could do that with one master PM and two mid-level PMs for a fraction of the cost, split the difference, and they think they're saving a fortune, and we're making a fortune off of it. It's great. We know what our capacity is. We know how many FTEs, how many folks a project manager can manage. Determine the number of PMs needed for a portfolio of work. Let's say 57. We run 50,000 project hours per year here. That takes me 3 master PMs and 5 mid-levels. So I need 8 people. How many project managers do you have today? Run these numbers in your organization and see what you get. I've asked my happy hour project management buddies to do the same sort of analysis, and plus or minus 20%, the numbers are surprisingly accurate. Thank you. I talked about training and perceived versus real value of training. One of the things that bedevils us as PMO leaders, we know training helps. We know training makes everybody better. But how do you cost justify it? All of the organizations that offer training classes or consulting support are pretty expensive. So how do you justify that cost? Well, what is the cost of turning a mid-level, what is the cost benefit of turning a mid-level PM to a master PM? Well, that means that he or she can manage 4 to 5 more people per month, which means if I turn 2 of those guys if I convert 2 of those people from performers or mid-levels to masters, that's one additional PM I don't need. So do the math on it for your organization. I believe this presentation will be available for everybody, right, Jim?
Yes.
So look through the numbers and just see what kind of analysis that you can do in terms of the number of PMs in your organization, how you can justify some of the costs. PM capacity metrics are used as a benchmark for PM utilization year over year. So your organization today, your PMs manage 2.5 people per month. And that may be spot on because you're a new startup, you got a bunch of beginner PMs, you're just rolling out the methodology, and you got all this stuff going on. So your goal next year is to increase that to 3.9 FTEs. And it demonstrates the value of your method and your approach in terms the business can understand. With the same number of project managers, I was able to do 40% more work without hiring additional staff. And it's something of value that we can easily demonstrate to guys like Burke. I should have a picture of Burke on here, by the way. So again, to summarize, our vice president walks into my office and asks how many PMs we have, how many PMs we need. Boy, it's tough. Let me go inventory our projects, determine what we have going on and what's in the pipeline. Let me make sure that everybody's following the methodology. Let me rate the project managers and then establish performance metrics based on their rating and come up with an answer. So he probably didn't expect me to take 6 months to answer his question, but when I finally did, I walked into his office and sat down. I said, you know what? We've got 200 PMs in healthcare. We need 115. and it was as if the gates of hell had flung open. From a management perspective, he sees a $3 million a year savings. Oh, you're a genius, I love you. So go out and tell the accounts they've got to reduce staff by that much. And the genius mantle got thrown out the window when that happened. So let me go back to what I started the presentation with. Take the emotion out of it. If I've got one project manager on my team that is managing 15 FTEs a month and 3 other project managers that are managing 2, explain to me why. I mean, there might be a compelling reason. In many cases, it was because our project manager was also doing a ton of other stuff. He or she was a site support lead, or the consultant, or the service desk guy that was answering MS project questions. There might be good reasons for that, and never lose the perspective when you're talking about numbers and try and take the emotion out of the discussion that there are real people at the end of it. But the bottom line is we were significantly overstaffed from a project management perspective. Many of the folks were transitioned into other roles. Many of the folks were frankly doing other roles, but they were classified as project managers. So we transitioned the appropriate number of folks, the appropriate number of roles. We brought all project intake, project assignments into a central office, and began assigning healthcare projects from there, analyzing capacity on a monthly basis, and then tweaking the number of projects each PM was managing up or down to make sure they were in the capacity range. It was a great deal. The organization loved it. PM Solutions and PMI loved it. So it works. It works in a big company. Now, it remains to be seen how well that kind of thing works in a small to mid-sized company. In fact, my suspicion is in most small companies, you have the opposite problem. You're understaffed as opposed to overstaffed. And if that's the case, then obviously you can use the analysis to cost justify bringing on additional PMs. One of the things that we found that I thought was kind of interesting was that project quality actually increased. We found that a number of PMs are just not surfing the internet all day and really bored with their jobs because they just didn't have enough work to do. And it's amazing when you get a couple more project assignments how excited you get and how intense you become, especially if you're a senior project manager. So rather than a reduction of project quality, we actually noted an improvement. Bottom line is, and I don't want to spend a lot of time going through this piece of it because I do want to save some time for questions. But leveraging project managers involves taking all of the PMs from all of those account organizations and moving them into one big team. And the big team is responsible for multiple project assignments. I might be assigned to a project, physically on-site to a project in Baltimore and have 2 other virtual projects that I'm managing in California. So there are a lot of logistics that you have to work through and that kind of stuff. But we found that it was a significant benefit to our organization. And keep in mind that individual targets can be set for PMs. If I'm a senior PM and half the time I'm working as an account manager, cut the time in half for Robert. Robert is a senior PM, but he's only required to manage 5 FTEs a month because half of his time is spent doing something else. And again, the numbers aren't gospel, but once it's understood, once the metrics are understood, I think you'll find that your PMs like it, your companies like it, and it's a value to everyone. So again, just summarizing what we did in terms of optimizing project management capacity and creating a leverage pool from that. As I move on, before we go to questions, I wanted to say something about quality. One of the things that really was trumpeted as part of the PMO of the Year award was the fact that we achieved 96% success on our projects. And that was a 50 project inventory over about a year. And with a smaller subset of the leverage pool, and 96% is just godly. I mean, rolling out those numbers, you get a statue in front of the building. Someone at the European Symposium asked about my definition of success. And, well, it's on time, on budget, acceptable level of quality. Well, what does on time mean? Well, you hit the date. Well, what if the customer asks you to postpone it? Yeah, he's right. If it's a customer requested change, we didn't ding you from a project success perspective. If it's oh God, we don't have the staffing to deliver this on time, we need to push this out 6 weeks, then that's a miss. So just make sure you define success up front. And the reason I say that is because at the European Symposium, boy, we had a British guy come in to do one of the keynote addresses. He was just great. This guy was funny, great project management stories. It was just wonderful. And the analogy that he used was an airplane landing, leaving London and landing in New York. And he's talking about all these millions of parts that are assembled and how the checklist that the captain goes through before the plane takes off. And after all this, it lands, it's 20 minutes late, so the project's a failure. How many of you would get on an airplane with only a 67% chance of project success? Wow, no, not me. I'm not getting on there. Honey, you're driving across the Atlantic. Yeah, well, nobody. But he wasn't defining project success the way you and I do. He was defining project success as landing safely. And the reality is the probability of that plane landing safely in New York is 99.999985 or whatever the number is. Does anybody really care if that 7-hour flight is 15 minutes late? I mean, you might, but in general, just make sure when you start quantifying success that you do so in real-world business terms. That was great for the presentation in Berlin, but it wasn't reality. Nobody's going to get on a plane that has a 67% probability of landing unless you're a test pilot or something. But it's very easy. It's very easy sometimes to get so involved in the metrics that you forget about the real world aspects of what we do. So just to finalize, please make sure if you don't have a methodology or it's inconsistently applied, it's foundation step one. Certification is important because it lets you identify standards for each level of project manager. Metrics allow you to monitor PM efficiency, utilization, reduce cost, and sell it to management. And finally, a leverage pool reduces the cost of project management to the organization by optimizing PM utilization. So that's what I have for the presentation. I think I'm okay for a couple of questions, right?
Okay, yes. Okay. We have a microphone now, and we have an agent wandering around with it.
Thank you. Project complexity seems to increase with the number of people involved in a project. If you work in a highly matrixed organization, those people are often part-time on your project. Did you find that less than full-time equivalent people with a large number of people on the project impacted this calculation or approach?
Yes, but it was linear. The issue that we have with very complex projects, more than the number of people, are the number of specialized skill sets. There were some spikes in the data for projects that required somebody with Rhino experience, if you're familiar with that OS layer. People that have specific network experience, specific whatever experience, because a critical resource is much more, in terms of the number of resources to manage, yeah, complexity is reflected in our numbers in terms of volume of resources. On projects that have a large number of very specialized skill sets, we actually had to pull those projects out of the mix. So if your company does a lot of research and development work, for example, where you have physicists sitting around doing physicist stuff, I'm not sure that these numbers are directly applicable. One piece of advice: don't accept anybody else's metric numbers as gospel. A better way up front of just analyzing your data is going into whatever actual hour system that you're using and saying, you know, I know that Josh is my best PM, and Josh on the average manages 8 FTEs a month. So if everybody else is in that 8 FTE range, you know, maybe the number is 8, not 10. If on the other hand, PMs that are at the same rating level, certification level as Josh are managing 12 or 14 FTEs a month, maybe Josh and I need to have a little bit of a talk. And so it's not necessarily, our numbers were based on empirical data. We actually pulled 350 successful and unsuccessful projects over a 2-year period and classified them. And we took into account things like change requests, customer requested change requests, or not having enough resources or what have you. And we determined that the projects that have the best chance of success, large projects that is 5 mil and up, that have the best chance of success, are projects that are managed by master PMs managing no more than 10 FTEs a month on the average. So, I love watching the microphone guys run. It's like taking the fam out to dinner and watching the valet go get the car. This is great. There you go.
Would you recommend these metrics for mega-sized projects where the project team is about 100 FTE and your contractor's workforce is about 10,000 people?
Well, that's clearly an extraordinary number.
That's what we work on.
I'll tell you for a fact. I have spent the last year of my life validating these numbers with a number of different companies. And every seminar, discussion, presentation that we do involves, you got it wrong. I mean, we got offshore resources. Can't do that with offshore resources. Pull the numbers, call me back on Monday. Well, you know, your numbers really aren't all that far off. The largest projects that we validated these numbers with are about 120 FTEs. And those include contractors, those include customers, those include direct labor, direct SMEs, direct company paid SMEs. And the numbers seem to hold fine. They hold fine on smaller projects. With a really large workforce, my concern isn't so much about the accuracy of the numbers, it's the administrative overhead of tracking all of that. Keep in mind that if these numbers are perfect and you're assigning PMs based on the numbers, somebody has to do the work. Somebody has to do the analysis. Somebody has to keep track of what Robert and Jim are working on. Somebody has to keep track of the pipeline of incoming projects. And man, when you're dealing with all that stuff, I can see where that would become somewhat overwhelming. We use simple Microsoft Office tools to track all of that. And if I had an organization that large, I would probably look at building something to support it. But it's my thoughts.
How would you count your FTEs in a fractured organization where you have multiple projects per resource? So maybe you are only getting 20 to 40% of the time per week out of a resource. How did you account for that?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one of the conundrums that that many companies find themselves in. For example, I've got a network SME that's assigned to project work. Well, that's not his primary responsibility. Break fix is his primary responsibility, and if you want to get your head chewed off, go tell your vice president that the guy can't work on break fix stuff because he's got him doing project. That doesn't go over well. Keep in mind, we don't measure by resource. We measure by baseline effort hour. And we frankly divorce ourselves from the resource management component.
But you had in there FTEs.
Correct.
FTEs manager
Correct. Correct. So let's say that I have a network SME that's 50% assigned to this project, 50% assigned to break fix. As far as from a calculation perspective, I assume that he or she is going to spend 80 hours a week on this project. If he's only available for 20, the project's going to move longer. Now, if the project manager comes to us and says, you know, my project's slipping, I can't hit the numbers because my resources aren't dedicated, that's a conversation for you and the resource manager. If he's pulling that SME off, he needs to get you another resource in the interim. And if you find that a number of projects are delayed, you've accomplished what the metrics are designed to accomplish. One of the things that the metrics are designed to accomplish, which is to flag an organizational issue. You know, I'm trying to optimize utilization, but I can't because, frankly, we're short network SMEs. If we had 8 more SMEs, these 4 projects would get back on schedule, and the cost reduction is this much. I mean, just from project management costs. All metrics are designed to do is be a flag, not an answer. And so that happens a lot. The onus is on the project manager to build and maintain an accurate schedule. If my network SME is scheduled at 50%, 20 hours a week, and I find that I only have him or her for 10 hours a week, then he's got to update the schedule. He's got to update the schedule with resource availability. One more. Well, at least get them close together.
I'm just wondering, it seems that any given independent project has a certain amount of overhead for the project manager. So if you give a master PM one 10 FTE project versus 10 1 FTE projects, that's 10 schedules, 10 project plans, 10 status reporting meetings to go to each week, 10 et cetera and so forth. Did you guys find any sort of, did you have to account for that in any sort of way?
Yes. Yes, and it was much messier than your question implies. The problem with all project management schedules is that there's not a nice uniform 1,000 hours a month. I mean, because it's spiking, right? It's spiking over the life of the project. So at the beginning of the project, I mean, he might actually be managing 20 FTEs a month. And part of the resource management component on project assignment is, I mean, you have to apply real world to it as well. I mean, we had 3 resource managers whose job it was to analyze projects and project intake and project responsibility. I mean, we're not just throwing an assignment out there. We're calling the PMs like, look, it looks like over the life of your project, you're only managing 5 FTEs a month, so I need to get you another project. That's fine, but can you wait until August 31st because I'm right in the middle of planning right now, and I guarantee I'm managing a hell of a lot more than 10 FTEs a month. So there's that component of it. I would submit to you if your PM is managing 10 1 FTE projects, what's he doing building a project schedule for each of those? Give me one master schedule. So there are without a doubt overhead components to that. And you've got to be cognizant of it. I mean, we interview sponsors, customers, and PMs at the end of a project as part of our lessons learned process, ask what went well and what doesn't. And if it turns out that our PM was not 100% available because he was juggling too many projects, we analyze that and determine what we can do differently. It's just part of continuous improvement. Good question. Oh, boy, that one. I hated that.
So you're talking about just managing projects, but usually a project manager is also bringing in new business, doing development, managing resources, managing their own team. For the different roles, what do you typically see as overhead for like a master or a mid-level?
You guys are just spot on with all of these. These are great questions. Okay, so just real quickly, back to my service desk analogy. I do not want the project manager talking to the customer in any way, shape, or form outside of his communication plan, period. I don't want him consulting, going out to lunch, the basketball game, any of that stuff. I don't want him managing resources outside of the project. I don't want him talking to his wife. I want him making, and I can only say that because she's out halfway to Norman right now. She'll be at the mixer later this evening if you guys want to meet her, though. Anyway, I want my project manager, oh, you guys are going to kill me, to be an automaton. I want he or she to be managing activities on the schedule based on our best practices, period. That's why the methodology is so important to this. The overhead components are those weekly meetings he or she has with me to status me on the schedule. It's whatever outside of the project stuff I drag him into to report status, to meet with our sponsor because his project turned red or yellow. It's vacation time, but I want our PMs focused specifically on overseeing activities in the project schedule, making schedule updates, managing and resolving issues, and that's it. If he or she is consulting with a customer, if he or she is doing a symposium for UTD, he or she isn't doing the kinds of things that I want him to do. But I absolutely do not want him finding work for the PM, for the SMEs, or looking for his next assignment after the project's over. I mean, the only way this is successful is if your project manager is managing the project schedule on a daily and weekly basis. Appreciate the time, everyone. Any other questions?
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
I couldn't help but think of a sign I saw in a company one time that said, if it ain't measured, it probably ain't gonna get done. Sorry.